Hello, this is my video response 2 for Performance of Everyday Life, the 400 level seminar with Dr. Todd Barnes. And today I'm going to be discussing Erving Goffman's concepts of the presentation of self in everyday life through landscaping, not only as landscaper, but as service provider and landscaping as general labor, and how that reflects the individual owner, the property owner, the decisions they make, and how different communities necessitate different forms of landscaping, different front stages, different back stages, depending on like proximity to neighbors, general population densities, exports of communities, imports of communities, cultures of communities, and how landscaping affects the presentation of the selves of property owners throughout different communities. So I think this is a really rich opportunity to bring some of my own experience into the course material and overlay the two. I've been a landscaper for 8-9 years now. I kind of embarrassing. So I wanted to start off. I have a lot of experience with this. I wanted to start off with talking about regions, front region, back region, as a landscaper in often isolation. So these are small crews, we're portable, we're moving, and this really reminded me of the reading for today, for Monday, that was about cruising, right? And how these spaces shift and change and the meaning is given and often not understood. So as a landscaper, we have a couple of different back regions, but most of the regions we occupy are front regions, right? So even in the truck, it is often thought of as a private area, but realistically, your behavior is being monitored. Your speed is being monitored in the truck you're driving nowadays. You're lettered, so the truck has the company's name. And so your behavior, your operation of the truck, your even how docile or exuberant you're being in the truck reflects the company. And so when you're in a small community that you're offering services to, it's best to remain, comfortable, but also professional in the truck. 5 years ago, I had a guy whistling and howling out the window down Main Street in my hometown, and I was like, hey, dude, you absolutely cannot do that, right? And so that's a clear distinction between the back room, where often profanity and tomfoolery are allowed, but this is like just straight sexual harassment in public sphere. So that's a front stage area, and it's like, hey man, I fired him. So wonderful. But in the trailer is a back region, specifically when we can close the door on the trailer so it's completely enclosed. That's about as close as it gets, and often that is the improvised bathroom, that is a space for intimacy, that is a space for privacy, is the only opportunity throughout the day, except maybe a Wawa bathroom, where the landscaper, as individual superseding landscaper, gets to drop the mask, right? And to just be an individual for a bit. Also in rural areas, right, there are backstages that are comprised of cornfields, forests, the North 40 of your property, behind a pine tree where there's no one around and there's like 2 deer back there. That's another really great back region. But it's, now I'm working in suburban Morris County, so it's like gone, lost, completely gone. So I wanted to discuss the difference between like rural and suburban, because landscaping doesn't really apply to urban, right? It's just a couple plants here and there. But with suburban landscape, right, the front region of the lawn, of the landscape, itself, the landscape as a presentation of the owner self, is completely surrounded. We have a couple of fences, but every direction, omnidirectional, right, is a front stage because your backdoor neighbor can see you from the back of your house. And you can see him from the back of his house, and there's no privacy, there's no end in sight to this thing, right? And often these will be HOA communities, like people will be fussy and everyone wants to be perfect to show face for their neighbors. The little X's are fences. And the offshoots are driveways, and this is just a traditional, it's a suburban community, right? And everyone's worried about everybody, and everyone is constantly trying to save face because this is often an upper middle class existence, right? And so now we have the rural communities, and this is just supposed to show a diner, a cornfield, a farm, and a single private house. And there are few front regions here, right? Maybe the front of the house, the front of the farm, and the front of the diner. So all on that main drag. The rest of it can be back region for landscape as landscape, and for individual property as extension of the owner. So no one is worried about the farm because he's working the land. So another thing that changes the front region, back region of landscaping is the intention of the land. In the suburban model, it's all aesthetic. It's all treated to shit with chemicals, and it needs to be perfected until we cause algal blooms throughout the great state of New Jersey, but in which uses fertilizer at a greater rate than any other state in the country. But in the rural setting, no one cares, right? The grass can be tall, it can be overgrown, it can be clover, and it doesn't matter because it's not taken to be a front region. It is just the land. In the suburban, we are caught up with the individual as land, as property, and that is constantly face. In the rural, it's more land that's being worked. It's more just a place to stay, and often it's a generational holding. So we're seeing how time and space and communities change all these various opportunities. And a quote about like the landscaper as landscaper from Goffman on page 76 is, their condition is wholly one of ceremony. The public demands of them that they realize it is a ceremony. There is the dance of the grocer, of the tailor, of the auctioneer, by which they endeavor to persuade their clientele that they are nothing but a grocer, an auctioneer, a tailor. A grocer who dreams is offensive to the buyer because such a grocer is not wholly a grocer. And a landscaper who uses the bathroom is not wholly a landscaper. And a landscaper who walks into your forest is not wholly a landscaper, right? You got to be in and out. People are watching you like a hawk half the time. And it's just this constant pervasive eye. You know, you get some customers who love to stare. And there's also that interplay between the landscaper and the work and the individual owner, because I am presenting a self to the customer, and the customer is also presenting a self to me, right? And it's a manicured, you know, what's important to you, right? So what are they presenting to me? Often it's like, kind of like, hey man, get the job done, great job, wonderful, I'm good at my job. Sometimes you get the OCDs. You get the completely over the top kind of guys who want it perfect, right? And they make a distinction. They choose to be that way. They call every time it's not perfect. And that's a presentation of their self, which is also accentuated by the fact that they choose to tie their personal well-being and their personal identification with their property. So they want it perfect to feel more perfect in themselves, because it's a double presentation. They're presenting to me, but their property and the landscaping of their property, which is my responsibility, is an outward presentation of self in their community. And another quote, just to tie it back into the suburban versus rural versus urban. In all classes in our society, there's a tendency to make a division between the front and back parts of residential exteriors. The front tends to be relatively well decorated, well repaired, and tidy. The rear tends to be relatively unprepossessing. Correspondingly, social adults enter through the front, and often the socially incomplete domestics, delivery men, and children enter through the rear. And this really came, I went to Rhode Island a couple weeks ago, or in September at this point, and looking at like the mansions of like the Ritz, you know, like the Vanderbilts. It's like, oh wow, there are separate entrances, there are separate estates. This is what Goffman is alluding to, right? Like the high bourgeois, um like the money, right? But we do see that in suburbs. We do see that all throughout our country, all throughout the different classes in our society. But the one thing that the suburban community does is often, right? So the perfection would be tied to the wealth, right? But now you can be like lower middle class or middle class, maybe poor if you really budget, and you can have the necessity of this perfection in your presentation and this perfection of your property because every neighbor sees everything, and often it's enforced by laws, right? But at the base, it is a presentation of self in community through maintenance of your property, through decisions on which prayer tree you're going to plant or which type of grass you're going to do or your fertilizing services. And it's all this foolish game of using your grass to determine that you're better or richer or more caring than your neighbor. So I went over, passionate about the topic. Thank you.